There definitely are. Well, this will speak to them. So, Jeff, it's so great to have you on the episode today. It's a pleasure meeting someone who has an expertise in a very popular topic recently of mushrooms. So, tell us a little bit about how you got into this expertise.
Well, I was raised in the Pacific Northwest, and that's a very rainy, wet climate, perfect for mushrooms to grow. So when I was growing up, mushrooms were all around me. I was fortunate enough to get out and do some mushroom hunting with parents of friends and things like that. And then when I went to university, I studied anthropology, cultural anthropology. I was really interested in how other cultures operate and how they organize and things like that. But they also had a very good mycology department at the University of Washington. So I took mycology courses as well. I put the two together, and kind of my own coursework, so to speak, became the use of mushrooms worldwide for food, for medicine, and in shamanic rites. And I loved it. I mean, it's just a deep dive into that, how these mushrooms are being used as foods. And again, in traditional Chinese medicine in China, they've been using mushrooms for thousands of years in their traditional Chinese medicine. So that was another area that I explored pretty deeply. But of course, you get out of university and you've got a degree in anthropology and you're going, oh, where are all the great jobs in anthropology? Not so many. We had a mushroom farm, the only one in Washington State, 60 miles down the road, Olympia, Washington. My mycology professor said, well, why don't you go down there and talk to the owner? Because I'd talked to my mycology prof and I said, gee, I'd really like to learn how to grow mushrooms. I went down there, I got a job. I was there at this mushroom farm, and it's a very big farm, for the next 10 years. So I was essentially living with mushrooms, literally, for the next 10 years. I mean, a very big farm. And look, I enjoyed it. I truly enjoyed it. And I continued my studies while I was there, and I read everything I could about mushroom growing. I got into medicinal mushrooms a little deeper. So that was really the start of my career, so to speak. It was simply me and all of my fungal friends.
I love that. The puns. My boyfriend actually, he does the fungi one a lot. He's like, I'm a kind of a fun guy, whenever we talk.
I know. And I've never heard that one before.
I'm sure. So a lot of people have heard of, right? We know culinary mushrooms. We know of, things like portobello and shiitake, and please correct me if I'm speaking these words incorrectly, because this is not my expertise.
Perfect. No, you got shiitake correct.
Okay. So we know a lot of these on the shelves, right, at the supermarket. You throw them in a stir fry. You could, put them in some meatballs, kind of add a nice umami flavor to them. And I just remember back in the day when I was in school to become a dietitian, someone said, oh, mushrooms are like the most pointless vegetable ever. I don't know why you would ever add them in. And I thought to myself, like, that can't be true. Like, everything that comes from the ground must have some medicinal benefit, some nutritional benefit to it. And I myself, went online and found out, the benefits of mushrooms in terms of their fiber content, right? So the prebiotics and some B vitamins. And then there are certain mushrooms that have vitamin D in them, right? Which is quite unique considering vitamin D rich foods are not many in the diet. So we've got those, right? The more common ones. Can you speak to the ones that are being used more medicinally? Ones that, we hear about, like reishi and chaga and all these fancy mushroom powders and stuff that have come out.
Well, yeah, absolutely, I can. But before I do, let me just kind of follow up on what you said about the nutritional benefits, because what you said and about the person who was talking about, oh, no food value there. That's so interesting, isn't it? And when I started in at the mushroom farm back in 1973, basically classical nutritionists, that's principally what they thought. And the real reason for that thinking was that mushrooms are low in calories. Low cal. And that's something today that is a positive thing. But back in the 70s, it was like, if you don't have calories, well, there's no energy there. It's kind of a non-food. And so that's how they looked at mushrooms. But the interesting fact is that mushrooms have between 20 and 40% protein, and it's a high quality protein for, let's just call it a vegetable. It's not truly a vegetable, but for a vegetable. And when I'm giving you these ranges here, what you need to remember is that every single mushroom species will have a different nutritional profile. So you can't just have one profile for every mushroom. That's not how it works. So 20 to 40% of a protein, very low in fat, mostly carbohydrate, but the carbohydrate is a high quality carbohydrate. Are you familiar at all with mannitol?
I am, yes. And people who are listening we've talked about low FODMAP. So if you're following a low FODMAP, some people don't digest this type of carbohydrate very well, but very healthy for some people.
Well, it is. See, mannitol is a very slow acting carbohydrate. Most carbohydrates we think of are starches. Mushrooms do not contain starch. What they do have as a storage carbohydrate is actually glycogen, like what we have, but only small amounts. So their carbohydrates are trehalose, mannitol, slow acting, and that is part and parcel of what you were saying as well, which is fiber content. Mushrooms are very high in fiber. So a lot of that carbohydrate is locked up in the fiber. And another carbohydrate, actually a polysaccharide in mushrooms, are what are called beta glucans. And beta glucans, we think of, okay, beta glucans, we might think of oats or something like that. And beta glucans are part of the fiber, but the mushroom beta glucan is very different. It has a different architecture in it than, let's say, an oat beta glucan. Mushroom beta glucan is a beta 1,3,1,6. And scientists have demonstrated that this beta glucan is highly active with our immune system. So this is the primary benefit that we get from a medicinal mushroom, is it potentiates our immunity. Now, in today's world, especially, people are much more interested in something that can help them immunologically. But getting back to the nutritional benefits, high in vitamin B1, 2, and 3, like up to 25% of those B vitamins. You talked about vitamin D, and vitamin D is really interesting in mushrooms because, first of all, mushrooms are very low in vitamin D, but they have a compound in them called ergosterol. And ergosterol is much like our cholesterol. And cholesterol and ergosterol are precursors to vitamin D. So when the mushroom gets exposed to UV light, that ergosterol turns into vitamin D2. With us, when we're exposed to UV light, cholesterol turns into vitamin D. So that's where we get our vitamin D from. We get it from the sun, and it's part and parcel of changing that cholesterol. With a mushroom, it is this ergosterol in there. So we actually have a mushroom where we have exposed it to UV light, and now we can get up to 2,000 IUs of vitamin D per gram of dried mushroom powder.
Wow, that's incredible.
And you know, well, it is. And what's really interesting about it, if you were to look at the way that vitamin D3 is produced. It is not a process that you would necessarily think is positive, because there's a lot of chemicals used in the process to refine it, because it starts out coming from sheep's wool and the lanolin in that sheep's wool. That's where the majority of vitamin D3 comes from. Whereas with vitamin D2, like from the mushroom, it's just mushroom powder where that vitamin D2 comes from, or could be purified if one wanted to. But I love the idea that we could eat or consume nothing more than 1 dried gram of mushroom powder that's been exposed to sunlight and get 2,000 IUs of vitamin D. For me, I'm just like, I love that idea. From our lowly mushroom, we can actually get vitamin D. So I like to think of mushrooms as the forgotten food, and I also call them the missing dietary link. And that's why I'm always telling people, put mushrooms into your diet. One of the reasons people don't like mushrooms is they don't cook them properly. If you cook a mushroom on low heat, what happens is all the water comes right out of it. And now you've got these mushrooms sitting in a pool of water in a fry pan. And you wonder why every child you've ever talked to said, oh, I hate those mushrooms. They're so slimy. Well, so I cook mushrooms in a hot pan, your choice of oils, hot pan. I like to brown them on either side. That keeps the moisture in. They will shrink. So one of the things for me is cut them maybe 1/4 inch thick, not too thin. Put them in the hot pan. I like to cook them reasonably well, so both sides of the mushroom get browned a little bit. And then a little salt, a little pepper, in terms of if you just want to eat them as is all you need. But otherwise, they go with everything. You can put mushrooms into eggs, omelets. You can put them into stir fries. You can eat them with your steak, or you can chop them up like I do, chop them up and put them into my ground round to make a hamburger. So I'll onions, mushrooms, I'll mix it all together. There it is. That's my hamburger. So they're very versatile. They're just a great food. And today, for the first time, we have the options of about 6 or 8 different species in the supermarket. I mean, back in the 1970s, we had the agaricus, and that's what we were growing on the farm I was working for. But we also had a Japanese scientist who was growing shiitake, enoki-take, and oyster mushroom. So while I was there, I also got to be a part of growing these new mushrooms. For at the time, that was really, nobody was growing these mushrooms in the United States. So it was really wonderful for me and my career in terms of learning how to grow other mushrooms. But at the same time, it opened up, other doors of, wow, you can grow these mushrooms. They really taste well, taste very good. And so again, there's a lot of choices now in the supermarket. And some of those mushrooms, like shiitake, like maitake, are medicinal as well. So they also have very active beta glucan. So I don't know if you're familiar with the whole concept of food as medicine, but to me, that's where we want to be, right, Erin? I mean, we want to be like everything that we bring into our body that we're consuming, not just all those wonderful nutrients, which are so important, but also if it has these other phytochemicals in it that give us these other benefits.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are moving towards that movement. I mean, as a practitioner, when I work with clients one-on-one or in my group program, you see this drive to have less of a reliance on supplementation and more of a reliance on food, because I think there's so much education out there now, even just what we're talking about today of how you can get vitamin D2 from mushrooms and the prebiotics that they can do to feed those healthy gut bacteria and modulate your immune system. And yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. I think that it's really important.
Well, and see, and that's one of the things, I mean, you just mentioned it again, and that is this fiber, and again, mushrooms, they don't digest well, and that's because of the fiber content. But today it's like, we know how important fiber is, and especially now that they recognize the microbiome and the fact that we're feeding all this fiber to the microbiome, which in fact, in many cases is actually consuming and bringing out some of those vitamins and other benefits from that we might not otherwise be getting, or certainly not think we do, because sometimes it's like, oh yeah, a high fiber food, yeah, we get that, but not many other things, right? But now we know that fiber is even more important than we thought it was.
Yes, absolutely. So I'd love to dive into a little bit of the research, because I actually had a reporter reach out to me a few weeks ago, and she was referencing this article that talked about, reduced mortality risk with consumption of mushrooms. And as a dietitian, we're trained to look at these research studies. And so I had some questions, of course, of, okay, well, it's an observational study, and we know that those aren't necessarily the most reliable, especially with, food recalls, people having to remember what they ate. But as I did a little bit more digging and I looked into the research, I found, turkey tail being great for lung health and being a potential, not treatment, but being potential, help for people with any sort of respiratory infection, such as COVID. And then more information on the benefits of mushrooms on the gut microbiome. And so I've seen a lot of this, and I'd love to, maybe in a more succinct way, just tell the listeners some of the main things we've seen in research that mushrooms can be beneficial. And then we can walk into like, which are the best in the grocery store and which are the best medicinally to kind of get your biggest bang for your buck. Because as we all know, in the society we live in, we want, some practical steps on how we can implement some of this.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed. Well, first of all, let me say, I totally agree with you about when you're looking at research and how should we take it, because you know what it's like. A journalist will look at some paper that has some title that says, okay, mushrooms are great for this or that particular illness, and they'll make a huge headline, mushrooms have cured something, right?
Yeah.
And when in fact, like you say, it might be an observational study. It might even be nothing more than an in vitro study. And so anytime I'm looking at the research, I look at it very closely. Exactly what did they use? Is it in vitro, in vivo? Is it a clinical trial? These are things that are so important. And if you go out on the internet, you'll find sites that make claims that mushrooms will improve hundreds of different diseases or cure some. And it's just like, I see that and my head kind of explodes. I just think, oh man, please don't do that. No. These exaggerated and wild claims, primarily just to sell products. And I'm just like, like right now, chaga. If you look out there on the internet for chaga, it's like the king of mushrooms, and there's nothing it doesn't do. And you know how some things they sell as panaceas, and I'm like, no, this is not a panacea. So again, we have to be very careful, and that's where, especially when we're talking to journalists, because they're just looking like anybody else there who's on the internet, for example, and is looking for clicks. A journalist is no different. They want to sell papers. They want something that people look up and they see the headline and they go, oh, what's that all about?
Yeah.
So I'm when it comes to all of that, I'll never make any claims. I'll talk about benefits, but I'm very careful about that. I'm not out here talking to people because I want to sell products. I want to educate people. I want people to know more about mushrooms. I want people to be able to make educated choices, whether it be eating mushrooms or supplementing with mushrooms. That's what I feel is so very important. I just don't want to come out here and make millions of claims and things like that. So where should we start on this now? Because we can talk, for example, about more general benefits, or we can talk about, like, for example, just to start, let me just say this about the beta glucans that I talked about earlier. Again, they are in all mushrooms, but the specific architecture of the beta glucan will make the difference between one mushroom being highly medicinal and another mushroom being, okay, those beta glucans are great for, they still give us some benefits, but not in the same way of some of these, what I would call very special mushrooms that have this architecture that makes them more active. So the beta glucan, what happens is we actually have a receptor site specific to beta glucans. And when those beta glucans hit that receptor site, it will then potentiate the manufacture of immune cells, macrophages, T cells. So they will be producing cytokines. And the way I look at it too is you eat mushrooms or you supplement with mushrooms, they will be there if you don't need those immune cells at that particular time. Nothing's really going to happen because they're there to meet a challenge. So if there's a challenge, they will start to produce, and that's where I look at them as being part of a prevention program, and that's what I feel is so important about herbal medicine or supplementation. I look at it, or even diet. To me, it's all about prevention, keeping us healthy so that we don't need interventions, medical interventions. We don't get sick as much. We are healthy. I look at the diet as this is the foundation of our health. If your diet is not good, there's not a lot of other things you can add to that to make your health better. It's just like telling somebody, oh yeah, don't worry about exercising. Don't worry about your lifestyle. It's all good as long as you take this supplement or something like that. No, it's like you really have to look at all of those different aspects to work what I would call a prevention type of diet or a prevention type of lifestyle. And that's where I see the mushrooms. It's just like, look, if you're not certain you're getting enough vitamin D, and a lot of people aren't, supplement with it. If you're having issues with regular colds, flus, you're just not feeling like you have enough energy or anything, well, try putting mushrooms into your diet, maybe supplement with them. But again, they're there to keep you healthier rather than there's something like, oh, gee, I feel like I'm getting a cold. I think I'll just take some of these mushroom supplements. That's not how they work. That's just not how they work. It's not like taking an aspirin for a headache and it's gone in a couple of hours. So that's something that people really need to understand. They're not going to, and I say this too, because I read when people will put in, like they'll buy a product and then you see all the reviews. Oh my God, I just bought this and today I was feeling so bad, and or yesterday I was feeling so bad, today I feel great. I'm like, really? I don't know about you, but that's not really how this works. So that's something to always keep in mind with mushrooms. And if you like, we could start, for example, with a reishi mushroom. Are you familiar at all with reishi mushroom?
Yes, I am. And I think a point that you made that I do want to make sure I speak to is, the cholesterol part of it. So in the research, I've seen that mushrooms can offer, cholesterol lowering properties. I think when people hear that the word cholesterol nowadays, we freak out and we think, oh, I don't want high cholesterol. Cholesterol is bad. But as you just mentioned, like we actually need cholesterol to absorb these fat soluble nutrients like vitamin D, which therefore improves our immune system. So you mentioned beta glucan, you mentioned there's cholesterol lowering benefits, support for the immune system. I've seen research on helping to protect the liver, and then antiviral and antimicrobial properties, and also the prebiotics, so the gut health. So I just want to kind of keep that out there as like a good umbrella for some of the things that these mushrooms are great for. And I like how you said it's not you take an aspirin and you feel better, because I often see this. People will say, oh yeah, I took turmeric for a few weeks, didn't feel like it did anything, or took a probiotic for a week, didn't really feel better. How soon are we expecting to feel better? And this is really the fault, unfortunately, good intention, but the fault of the healthcare, which I would call the sick care system, is you're sick, here's a pill, you instantly feel better. But healthcare, like true healthcare, which we would technically really term preventative care, doesn't work as a, day to day, here we go, here's a supplement, you instantly feel better. Love that you brought that up. So
yes, well, I totally agree. I mean, you and I are really totally on the same page when it comes to this whole idea, because we do have a sick care system. Wait till you get sick, go see the doctor. He gives you a prescription. He kind of calms you down a little bit, says, okay, everything's going to be fine. Go home, get your prescription, take these pills, you'll be fine. All of this. And I think there are some medical traditions, like I think in traditional Chinese medicine too, their whole precept is to keep you healthy so that you don't have to come and see them. So, and that's, I think, what's going on now in the United States. We're seeing a lot more holistic, or what are called integrative health practitioners. And, it's like going to a standard physician, MD in the United States. Do you think any of them would ever question, what is your diet like? What are you eating? How is your diet? Do you think they would ever bring that up? I've never had a physician say that to me. Oh, tell me about your diet. Never. No. Instead, it's like, okay, we've got 15 minutes. Tell me what's wrong. I'll tell you what I can do about it. See you later. Next. So really, with these mushrooms, again, it's prevention. Now, reishi mushroom is something that is very, what I would call that the kind of if you were to take one mushroom, reishi mushroom, you're not going to be able to eat it. Have you ever had one in your hand?
Never.
A reishi mushroom? It is, well, for one, it's beautiful. It's got this ram's horn shape for the cap. It's red, but it's like a piece of wood when you dry it out. It's not an edible mushroom. You have to chop it up and you have to make a tea with it if you're using the actual dried mushroom. Now we will take that and we'll produce a extract powder from that mushroom. But basically, it's a piece of wood. It has, we measure beta glucans, and we've had a testing of all our mushrooms and at least 15 different mushroom species for about 5 years. So we know the level of beta glucans, we know the level of ergosterol, we know all of, we have charts with a lot of that data. Reishi and turkey tail have the highest contents of beta glucan of all the mushrooms we've tested. So reishi is high in beta glucan, but what differentiates it from the others, it has these bitter compounds in it called triterpenoids. And these triterpenoids are what, you talked a little bit, you mentioned liver function. The triterpenoids are very, very good for liver function or dysfunction. So that's something where they can help the liver. They can help to just kind of purify the blood. That's what they say as well. But that's what makes reishi mushroom very different from all the others, because it shares beta glucans with all these others, but it has these triterpenoids. And the triterpenoids, just so people, if they ever go out and buy a reishi mushroom, an actual mushroom, or even if they have a reishi mushroom product, dump it out and taste it, it should be bitter. It's a very bitter herb in that sense.
Which is
So
great for
reishi is,
digestion. I mean,
well, absolutely.
yeah, any sort of bitter.
Absolutely right. And isn't that interesting? Because we have been bred not to like bitters.
Mm.
You know, it's like something's bitter. No, we've been bred to like sweet. So if something's sweet, you know, people eat too much of it. If something bitter, they stay away from it. They're not interested. So reishi, to me, in that sense, is in a category all its own. So very good for the immune system, good for liver function. Again, it has all these other properties of being antibacterial, antiviral. Another mushroom that's interesting, especially for gut health, and that would be chaga. And chaga is not even a mushroom. Have you ever seen a picture of a chaga?
Beautiful.
And so you're familiar with this chaga, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this is kind of like this black, irregular growth off the side of a tree. And it's just like, what is that? It's just, it's
looks
so
almost like
unusual.
You would be poisoned after eating it.
Well, yeah. And you know, the interesting thing about it is it's not truly a mushroom, but what it is, it's a manifestation of a fungus that has attacked a tree, and now the tree is reacting to the fungal invasion and producing this form that we call chaga, and a forester would say that's what's called a canker disease. So that's what the chaga is. It's not mushroom. It's got very little fungal tissue actually, but what it does have in it are triterpenoid compounds, and it has been used extensively for stomach, intestinal issues. Very common use of this in traditional medicines, traditional herbal medicines in Eastern Europe, in Russia, China a little bit. So that's a mushroom. I always say to people, look, if you want to try one of our mushrooms for maybe irritable bowel syndrome or Crohn's disease, try chaga. Just give it a chance. Maybe it will help you. So that's kind of two mushrooms that are not edible mushrooms, whereas we do have edible mushrooms that are like a shiitake or a maitake that have tremendous amount of scientific evidence that demonstrates their immunological properties. That's where, if you go to the supermarket or the Whole Foods or wherever, and you want to pick out a mushroom to eat, man, those are the two that you should buy. And I think they also have lion's mane in some markets as well. Do you know lion's mane? Do you have lion's mane in your local market?
In Whole Foods, they do have lion's mane, and also too, if somebody listening has a farmers market, I've noticed they've started popping up in farmers markets as well. But we do have lion's mane, and then the cremini. I'd love for you to speak to those as well, if there are any benefits to those, because I've been seeing a lot of those showing up.
Well, the cremini, probably you're seeing that because it's currently in season. You're in California, right?
I'm actually in Boston.
In where?
Boston.
Boston. Okay. Well, it's mushroom season in the United States, so just kind of the end of that. So did you see the creamy fresh, or was that dried?
Honestly, I don't remember the last time. I could
Probably dried, because it's a
Okay.
wild mushroom, and you might get it fresh in season. Like on the West Coast, you might get it fresh in season, but normally doesn't hit the food markets. But you might also be thinking of, I think I know what you're thinking of. For one, there's a portobello, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then the cremini. Actually, I was thinking of porcini. Cremini. Here's what's kind of interesting. You know the button mushroom?
Yeah.
That is agaricus.
Okay.
But agaricus also has different strains that come in different colors.
Mm.
So the cremini is the agaricus, but it's a brown topped mushroom, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same species. And then the portobello is allowed to mature to become this very, very big mushroom cap.
Mm.
But what we call the button mushroom, we call it a button because it's immature. So the cap hasn't opened. We don't really see the gills under it unless it's been sitting on the shelf too long. So those three mushrooms are actually the same species of mushroom.
Interesting. Okay. So
They've just given it different names.
okay. So chaga and reishi, I'm seeing chaga being one of the best ones for digestive health. Reishi and chaga together, both really great for immune function. What about the ones that you see on the shelves? So like the portobello, shiitake, like what benefits do we get from those? Are they similar in terms of beta glucan?
Shiitake definitely. Shiitake and maitake, the beta glucans and the immunological activity is very important for those. And I always tell people too, if there is one edible mushroom you should be eating, it is shiitake mushroom. Do you eat shiitake mushroom at all?
I do not like portobello as much as I like shiitake, and I get so much hate for it. And I tell people it's the texture for me. I love the taste and the flavor of the shiitake. Like put it in some olive oil and some salt and garlic, and I am in heaven.
Oh, Erin, absolutely. Shiitake is my favorite mushroom too. I just think the shiitake, I mean, it's got not only a great flavor, the texture is good, it's got a wonderful aftertaste, and it's got an aroma that is just out of this world. In fact, in China, they call it shangu, which means fragrant mushroom. No, it's a wonderful, wonderful, and that's why I always tell people, eat shiitake. If there's one mushroom to eat shiitake. You will be getting not just the culinary nutritional benefits, you'll also be getting good medicinal benefits. So let's switch gears a second here and we'll talk about lion's mane. Lion's mane is so popular these days. It has gone from 5 years ago, we sold hardly any lion's mane. Today we sell tons. I mean, literally tons. It's our top selling mushroom. And the reason is that it's categorized as a nootropic. Are you familiar with that term?
So that's for brain health, right?
Yeah, brain health and just kind of anything that can enhance our performance is kind of considered a nootropic. And lion's mane has got some very good studies, including clinical trials, that demonstrate it does actually help with memory. It does help a bit with mental acuity. And you know, everybody, young and old, especially old, when it comes to memory, they're like, oh man, where did my memory go? Why can't I, what's that word again? What is it? Or I had that on the tip of my tongue. What was that I was just thinking about? Man, if there was a memory pill out there, let me tell you, everybody would want it, right? Well, lion's mane has these compounds called nerve growth factor, which actually stimulates the production and organization of neurons. So due to that, and you know, as we get older too, we don't produce as much of this nerve growth factor, so we're not getting the benefits of that so much. So lion's mane has these compounds that will help to produce and will stimulate the production of this nerve growth factor. So that's a mushroom that people use as a nootropic, as something that hopefully will help memory. I'm not going to tell you your memory is going to be, you know, 100% tomorrow or in 15 days or 30 days. Try it and see. But that's where it's used. And there does seem to be some relatively good science behind it. And these would be actual clinical trials where they have control groups and they give one group the lion's mane, the other placebo. They do a battery of tests. After 120 days, they do the tests again. and the one with the lion's mane scores higher than they originally did. And then the interesting part about that is then they stopped taking lion's mane. 30 days later, both groups took the test. They were both down at baseline again. So I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. But look, that's just one clinical trial. And with herbs, it's rare when you can get a clinical trial because they're very, very expensive and no one wants to spend the money on them. And so you get the odd ones here and there. But a lot of what, for example, what we will do in the business is we will look at how mushrooms are used by traditional Chinese medicine or other groups of people worldwide. What is the traditional use? Is this still being used? And then we'll also look at the scientific literature. And is there a body of scientific data that will support the use of this mushroom as a supplement, as something that does have medicinal benefits? We put the two together and we say, okay, yeah, it appears that yes, there are these benefits, functional benefits for people. So that's kind of where we come together. So now we've covered a number of different mushrooms. Some of the ones that we haven't covered, are you familiar with cordyceps?
Yep.
Have you ever seen an actual cordyceps?
No, I'm
an
gonna
actual
look
caterpillar?
it up. I'm looking at the lion's mane one even, and it looks literally like a lion's mane. I've never actually looked it up before, but the cordyceps, it looks like almost just like, I hate to say it, but like little worms.
Well, yeah, cordyceps actually is called winter worm, summer grass, and in the wild, it grows off of a caterpillar.
Wow.
That's the traditional cordyceps. Now, that's not what we sell or people. In China right now, that cordyceps caterpillar fungus is worth $15,000 a dried kilogram.
Wow.
Nobody can afford that except the very wealthy. We cultivate a cordyceps, a different species, but it has been used interchangeably. So we can cultivate that. It's much cheaper, it's affordable. And what cordyceps has been used for is weakness, fatigue, lack of energy. So where primarily you might see cordyceps in terms of the supplement world, a lot of times it will be targeted for either athletes or if you lack energy and you need kind of an energy boost. Now I get my energy boost just from drinking some coffee in the morning, and that works really well for me. But for others, that's how they traditionally use cordyceps. So that's and again, we grow ours, no insects involved. And the funny thing is I tried to introduce cordyceps into the supplement market in 1991. I had a bag of these caterpillar fungi, and I was showing them to companies, and they looked at me and they said, "My customers do not want to eat a caterpillar." And also said, and besides, they are vegetarian. And I thought, oh yeah, of course. So anyway, this cordyceps that we grow is called Cordyceps militaris. It's a beautiful cordyceps. It also now that they've learned how to cultivate it, it's in the food markets in China now, and it is delicious. And again, it's a very small, very slender little thing that does not look like a mushroom. Kind of like you said, kind of almost like worm-like, but it's just small and slender, but very tasty as well. And that's what I love about this whole, our business in terms of, we primarily are in it as supplements, but we also sell into the food industry our mushroom extracts. But the fact that it's a food as well as utilized as a medicine or a tonic or however it's being used, I just love that. I just think it's so interesting that it can be a food as well as a functional medicine. That's just kind of very special to me.
That's beautiful. I love marrying those two concepts, and it's very evident that you're very passionate about it. Now, like I said, there's so much out there, right? There's I'm taking a protein powder right now that a company sent me that has, all the ones you mentioned, has chaga and lion's mane and turkey tail. And What is the issues with quality that people should be looking for? Because I know with certain protein powders, I always tell people you have to be careful with heavy metals and, the quality of where they're sourcing it from. So as a consumer, obviously you have a company and you have high standards for your products, but let's say someone's at Whole Foods or, online, and they're maybe wanting to purchase one of these things or these coffee, alternatives. What are some things to look for, and what are the issues with quality control?
Well, this is so important because when you go into these stores and you see 50 different brands and products, and here's what's happening, and what is that mushrooms are expensive to grow. Did you know that every single mushroom you've ever eaten has been picked by hand?
No.
It's been picked by hand. And if you go into a mushroom house and you look at these mushrooms growing, there are hundreds of thousands of these mushrooms on the beds there. And there are a dozen people in there pulling them out by hand and cutting off the bottom and putting them into a basket. It is insane. So you can grow mushrooms in the United States. You can put them into the food market. You can make a profit. It's a good business. But in the supplement world, we deal with dried powders. A mushroom, like most vegetables, is 90% water. When you take that fresh mushroom, which you're getting $5 a pound for, you dry it out. Now you have to get $50 for that same pound of mushrooms. The economics don't work. So what happens is companies in the United States will grow out a different plant part. And to clarify here, mushrooms don't have seeds. They have spores. Those spores in nature will germinate into a very fine filament. And when these filaments come together and form a network, that is called mycelium. That mycelium is what we call the vegetative body of this organism. And mycelium is out there, and it's kind of buried in the ground or buried in a piece of wood. We normally don't see the mycelium. What we see is the mushroom. So when conditions are right, that mycelium, which is underground or hidden from view, all of a sudden up comes a mushroom. That is what we call the fruiting body. So we have three stages or plant parts of this organism. We have spore, we have mycelium, and we have mushroom. Traditionally, the mushroom is what has always been used in traditional Chinese medicine and as a supplement. The mycelium, obviously, you can't dig it up and then somehow sort it out and use it for those types of purposes. But what companies in the United States do is they will take that mycelium stage, they will grow it out on sterilized grain. It could be rice, it could be oats. It's all done in a laboratory. After about 30 to 45 days, they will then empty that jar of grain out, and the grains are now covered with the mycelium. They'll empty it out onto drying racks. They'll dry it. They'll grind it to a powder, grain and all, and they will sell it as a mushroom. There's no mushrooms in it. Are you familiar with the food product tempeh?
Very much so, yes.
Okay. Do you know how tempeh is made?
I mean, I know it's fermented soybean, but I guess there's probably
very good. Yeah, it's actually fermented with a fungus. So that white that is growing on the soybeans is actually mycelium. So if you're eating tempeh, you're actually eating mycelium. Well, that's what these companies are making. They're making a tempeh-like product. They're drying it, grinding it to a powder, and calling it mushroom. And if you look at that tempeh, and if you've eaten tempeh at all, you know that that block of tempeh is probably 80 to 90% soy, and the rest is the white mycelium. Tempeh is a great food. I like tempeh, but they're selling tempeh made with, let's say, shiitake mycelium or reishi mycelium, and selling it as mushroom. And if you go into the stores, there is every likelihood that you will not even know that that's what you're actually getting. And so how because look, on that front label of all these products, it'll have a picture of a mushroom. It'll say reishi mushroom, shiitake mushroom. If you're lucky, you turn it around into supplement facts, and maybe it will say mycelium. And in the fine print where it says other, it might say myceliated oats or myceliated rice, but many companies won't tell you that that's what they're selling. Instead, they will even say mushroom in the supplements facts panel. So you have to be so careful. If a product, a mushroom product, actually says made in the USA, unfortunately, that is what you will be getting. You will be getting a product that is mostly grain starch and very little fungal tissue. So you will not be deriving any of the benefits that you're expecting to get from a genuine mushroom. Instead, you will be consuming mostly grain starch. And it is just absolutely unethical. It shocks me that that's going on, but probably 50% of the products in a supplement store will be these particular products. So if you want to be sure, if it says made in USA, it's probably one of these products. If you look on the back and it says mycelium, and in the other it says myceliated rice or myceliated oats, it's definitely one of these products. Look also for products that will say 20% beta glucan, or that would be something that would definitely take you up a notch if a company is actually saying the amount of beta glucan that's in that product. When we sell products, every single one of our products will have the beta glucan number on the label, whether we're selling it in bulk to other companies or whether we are selling it in our retail line. We will always put on there X amount of beta glucans. That is absolutely something. Now, I'm not going to say that you can absolutely rely on that, because I've seen companies that put that on there, and I know for a fact they aren't selling mushroom. But that you have a much better chance of getting a genuine mushroom product if it says beta glucan. And again, if it says made in the USA, you can pretty much write it off as one of these myceliated grain tempeh like products. I mean, can you imagine? You think you're buying a mushroom product, but you're actually getting ground up dried tempeh.
Which is a big concern, especially because, soy is a main allergen. And then you also have the issue with celiac and gluten sensitivity. So I think about cross-contamination and food sensitivity and hormone, imbalance. And there's so many issues with that. It's quite unfortunate, yet not surprising to me, considering I'm also a cannabis practitioner. So I'm very familiar with the supplement industry and the cannabis industry. And you see so much of this, and it's not discriminatory towards one specific type of supplement. It's just the supplement industry and the food industry as a whole. And, I'll definitely be putting, your website in the show notes so people can learn more about your products. And I like how you show, the steps of the different certified extracts and your quality standards and everything like that. I think that's amazing. We need more people who are being transparent about their products. I'm the same way, where all of my lab testing for my products are online, and you need to be able to show the consumer and educate them on how to choose these products. So I thank you for breaking it down. I just learned a ton. I didn't know that at all. I mean, I'd never purchased mushroom powders on my own, but now I know. I've especially seen them added to other things, like, it'll say, mushroom powder added to it. And now I'm able to look with a more skeptical eye, and I'm sure the listeners are as well.
Well, absolutely. And what's difficult is that on food products where it has a nutrition facts label, they can put on there something like mushroom complex or some other what I would call weasel words on there to not fully tell you what's in the product. And just like you said, you have somebody sent you something that is mushroom protein product. Man, send me what that is, because I would be very skeptical about that. Very skeptical, and it sounds to me like it could very well be one of these types of products. And again, I'm trying to educate people of this, and on our website we've got a ton of great information about this whole issue, as well as just quality control standards. And look, to be clear, because we can't grow mushrooms in North America and doing it for the supplement market, we grow them all in China. A lot of people say, oh God, well, that's it, China. I would never eat anything from China. Well, you know what? It's easy to say, but if you're trying to eat organically or something, man, look at all of the chemicals that are dumped on our crops in the United States. And we've been certified organic since 1992. I took OCIA to China with me in 1997, and we had the first organic certification workshop for mushrooms in China, 1997. And we use European certifiers for all our products, and the amount of testing we do. I love testing. I love testing. And so not only do we test for the active compounds, but every single batch we make has to be tested for heavy metals, pesticides, microbes. So everything is really well tested. A lot of people say there are no standards or no regulations in the supplement industry. That's absolutely wrong. However, that doesn't mean that the product you get is still going to be a good product. It could go through a lot of those tests and still be absolutely worthless product, much like these products I'm telling you about. They're sterile, organic grain with mycelium on them, grown in a lab. They will pass a pesticide test. They will pass a heavy metals test. They will pass a microbiological panel, and people can say, look, they're all tested. They're even organic. Yeah, but it's still grain powder. I'm sorry.
I'm really glad that you said all this, because again, we as consumers need to know this information, and you're always taking a risk when you do any sort of supplement. So food first, always, right? That's definitely my philosophy is we start with food. Go out there, buy some shiitake mushrooms, everyone. They're amazing. And of course, check out Jeff's website. It's got some incredible information and a full report that you can download with a lot of information on how mushrooms are produced and just more information and what we talked about today. Now, the most important question of the episode now is, Jeff, what is your favorite childhood memory with food?
Well, one of my favorite memories is when I grew up, my father was a dentist, and he allowed really no sugar in the house, no pop. We were actually taking vitamins in the 50s, but what that meant was I was kind of like, well, how come we're not having any dessert? So actually, I used to actually, my mom would allow me to purchase a cake recipe. And so I'd love to bake these cakes, not with frosting, of course, because it's like, no, that takes sugar, right? So I would have these cakes. I still love to bake cakes, actually.
That's amazing. I love that.
And again, we grew up no sugar. We had some honey in the house, no sugar, no pop, no dessert, maybe fruit or something like that. That doesn't mean like on Thanksgiving we didn't have, the pumpkin pies and all the rest.
Sure.
But yeah, it was a very different. We had actually whole wheat bread when all of my friends had Wonder Bread.
No way. That's so funny. I
Yeah,
was waiting for you
yeah.
to say that you got mushrooms for dessert or something like that. So I think that's a great memory. And I think I'm sure at this point you've probably perfected the cake. And I think it
Oh,
is
I
true.
can make a good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't use a mix. I can do it by scratch, a chocolate cake, whatever. And I love baking, actually.
I love that. That's awesome. I love baking too. And I think it's very therapeutic and just fun too if you're into, creating different recipes and things like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I'm really into making scones, like fruit scones, like blueberry scones or something like that, which I can make, and then that'll be my breakfast. I'll have a blueberry scone.
There you go. And what's your address again? So we'll all
Yeah,
be
my
coming over
scones
for
are very good.
breakfast.
I really, yeah,
That's
coffee
awesome.
and scones.
That's wonderful, Jeff. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your expertise with us. If people want to get in touch with you, what would be the best method to do so? Is it just visiting the NAMX website, or is there an email?
Yeah, yeah. Come to namex.com, NAMMEX.com. And the other website that we have is called realmushrooms.com. And that is the retail site. And that also has got a ton of great educational material. And that's what I really encourage people, because I've got slideshows on the NAMEX site that show all of our mushroom production facilities, how we make our extracts, all of that. So there's a lot of information there that's really kind of fun and interesting, and it's very deep on both sites. So definitely come to the websites for that.
Great. Awesome, Jeff. Well, thank you so much again. It was a pleasure talking with you. Like I said, I learned a lot today, and I need to go digest all of this. And I'm also going to follow up with an email with you, if it's okay, and just send you the supplement company that sent me some stuff. I'd love to get your feedback.
Absolutely. 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 And Erin, look, it's been really great talking to you. I love what you're doing. You've got a wonderful energy, and I'm so happy there's people like you out there to bring this new health paradigm to others. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Thank you for that. And I would thank you as well for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, Jeff.
See you.